is Jaime Bennett, and welcome to the first episode of The Warrior Within. We are going to be discussing a very sensitive topic today, so I am going to insert a disclaimer at this point. We are going to be speaking of death and dying, and my personal experiences with death and dying. These are my opinions. They don't represent the opinions of anybody else. They are my opinions and my opinions only. I am not a professional, and so therefore don't take anything that I say as being a professional standpoint. All right. So, welcome to my first episode of The Warrior Within, and I hope you enjoy this program. The first thing that I'm going to be speaking of is my first experience with death. I was 6 years old, and my grandpa had cancer, and he was in remission from cancer for quite a while. His hair grew back in after he had received his round of chemotherapy, and it grew back in red. I remember that. And he was tired all the time, of course, because they took it out of him, and he was able to go back to work at the steel mill, and he got hit with a steel beam in the stomach or the ribs. That's the story that I remember happening. Before he ended up in the hospital because the cancer had come back, he was napping in his bed, and me and my cousins were playing hide and go seek, and I had jumped in my grandpa's bed, not realizing that he was taking a nap in the bed, and I accidentally landed on him. And of course I was 5 years old at the time. I think like a few weeks after that happened, he ended up in the hospital really sick with cancer, and I thought that it was my fault. I had no idea. I was a little kid, didn't know anything about it. I thought that I had made my grandpa sick. Um, Come to find out, the cancer returned, and he was very, very sick, very, very weak, and in the hospital. My mom and dad didn't have a whole lot of money, so we had to sell my dog Freckles, a Walker Coonhound, in order to have the gas money to go and see my grandpa in the hospital. I couldn't handle being in the same room with him. That was basically like seeing death in the face. Cancer is horrible. It's horrible, horrible. And he was vomiting a lot. He couldn't hold anything down. Very, very frail, very, very, very weak. And it was very hard for me to handle being in the same room with my grandfather and seeing him that way. He ended up passing away shortly after we seen him in the hospital, and he passed away probably like a few days before my 6th birthday. So that was my first experience with death, the first time that I realized that my grandpa wasn't just sleeping, that he had passed on, and that I would never see him again. Cancer is a horrible, horrible thing. It is a horrible disease, and, I've had other loved ones to pass away because of cancer. I really hope that they find a cure for it. I'm a huge advocate for finding a cure for cancer, for donating to cancer research. It's worth donating to. We need to conquer this horrible, horrible illness. The next loved one that I would like to talk about that had passed on was my cat Snowball. I had gotten him when I was 6 years old, and he lived until I was 21 years old. He ended up getting the same kind of cancer that my grandpa passed away from. And maybe I was kind of selfish in a way. I was trying to save his life. I was trying to save my best friend's life. So I had surgery done on him, And through the surgery, they did a biopsy on him, but we wouldn't get the biopsy results for quite a while. So she removed as much of the tumor, the mass, as she could. But in the process, part of his throat collapsed, and I did not know that. And so he was losing weight. He was getting more and more frail, and I was trying to give him a fighting chance, but he got to the point where he couldn't even get up. He couldn't even walk on his own. So me, my mom, and dad went to church one day, and we prayed about Snowball, hoping that he would get better. Came home from church and found him, like, something had ruptured in his ear, and found him in a pile of blood. So that was a horrible, horrible experience. We ended up taking him to the veterinarian the very next day and having him put to sleep. My dad had to carry Snowball to the back for me. I couldn't handle being in the same room when they were, putting him to sleep, when they were doing the process. I didn't want Snowball to think that I was doing it to him. And it's a really horrible experience. Here's my best friend that I've had since I was 6 years old, fighting the same cancer that my grandpa passed away from. So, yeah, like a lot of people, there are a lot of people out there that see animals as just that. They're animals, they're pets. But the way that me and my family believe, we believe that they are more than just pets, that they can be therapeutic, that they are a member of the family, and they deserve, just the same respect as a human being that you love and care about. So, yeah, I had to put my beloved friend of 14 years to sleep because he had had cancer. Cancer is a horrible thing. It's a horrible disease. When I was 17 years old, my Uncle Barry had passed away, and I got sick to my stomach that day at school for some reason. And I told my mom and dad, I said, I really need to come home. I don't feel good. I knew something had happened because I didn't feel right. And my mom and dad told me that my uncle had an accident with a gun, and he didn't make it. He passed away instantaneously. So that was a very rough experience that I'd had with death. A shock to the family. And so, yeah. Moving on, I ended up taking Theology of Death when I was at Quincy University, and we'd had a field trip to the morgue. I didn't end up going because I wasn't comfortable with going to the morgue at that point in time. But the class covered, the religion, the religious aspect to death and dying, the different cultures and how they handle death and dying. And it was a very informative class. I really enjoyed taking that class. It gives you different perspectives of when, your loved one passes away and how different cultures handle people passing on. My cousin, when my daughter was like, I don't know, she was probably like a year old at the time. My cousin had an accident, a car accident. It was a really bad car wreck. She hit black ice and her vehicle tumbled down into a ravine. She ended up surviving maybe 2 hours in the hospital after her real bad car wreck, and her mom and dad was not even allowed to go in and see her because that's how bad her injuries were. Like, she was unrecognizable. So my aunt said that after my cousin had passed on, it was like my cousin was speaking to her in a dream, and she says, "Mom, I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm taking care of the babies in heaven. That's my job. I take care of the new arrivals, the little babies that have passed away, and I take care of them in heaven." So that's, kind of how some people deal with their grieving process. I know in my family, we believe that people who pass on go to heaven. That's how we like to believe. Everybody has their different belief system. My grandma ended up passing away when I had just started dating my husband. I think we were engaged at the time, and we hadn't been engaged for very long. I had a feeling that my grandma was going to pass on. I told my work that she'd been really sick. She hasn't seemed like herself. I don't expect her to make it for very much longer. And I said, the date that I believe that she was going to pass away, and really freaky incident happened, and she ended up passing away on the exact date that I said that she was going to pass away from. That really freaked me out. But, I had a feeling that that's what was going to happen. And my mom didn't want anybody to tell me that she had passed away, but I had already known. I had felt the moment that she passed on. My aunt finally called me and notified me that my grandma had passed away, and I said, she wasn't wanting to tell me, she wasn't wanting to spit it out, and I said, "Just spit it out." And my aunt said, "Well, your grandma had passed away from an aortic aneurysm." And I said, "I kind of thought that that's what this was about." So that was really, really tragic. My aunt had taken care of my grandma. They lived right next door to each other, and my grandma said she wasn't feeling well and she was going to lay down and take a nap. And so my aunt went back to her house, and then Sandy, my grandma's dog, started howling and barking and notified my aunt that something was the matter. And my aunt went over to the house and found my grandma deceased. She had passed away in her sleep. We had asked the coroner if we would have called an ambulance if it would have done any good. And he said no, she had an aortic aneurysm and it was instantaneous. There was nothing that we could have done about it. Um, so I have peace in knowing that my grandma passed away in her sleep. It could have been worse. I think that, if you're going to pass away in life, that it happening in your sleep is probably the best way for it to happen. You're not aware, you're asleep, and with it being instantaneous, I don't think that she suffered. um I've had animals, friends to pass on, and it's never easy. It is a very, very difficult situation to handle. um 2020 has been a rough year for us, for me and my family, because my daughter's therapy cat had passed away. She died from kidney disease. She was 14, and she spent Christmas with us, and then she had to be put to sleep because her body couldn't handle it anymore. She tried her best to beat it, and she had to be put to sleep. And around the same time, one of our friends had passed away all of a sudden, out of the blue. So, we were dealing with that situation around Christmas time last year. So, Christmas time is kind of a rough point of the year for me. Um, a lot of loved ones have passed on around Christmas time, and it's just not, it's not, it's not a happy time for me. I try to make it happy. I try to get into the Christmas spirit and decorate trees and do things for my little daughter. She enjoys Christmas, so I don't want to take that away from her. So I just put on a brave face and I do my best to be cheery and to get in the Christmas spirit. Um, I was a vet assistant at one point in time, and my job was to help animals to pass on who were really sick. And I would always make sure that I had a hand on them while they were being administered the drug to put them to sleep. I didn't want them to ever go out of this world thinking that, nobody cared about them, that they weren't loved. I wanted to make sure to have a hand on them so that they could be comforted. That is a very stressful part of being a vet tech or a vet assistant, is having to help with animals passing on, with animals crossing the rainbow bridge. Um, the only thing you can do is not have emotions while you're in the room. And, you just put on a brave face and you break down in tears when you're headed home from work. There were many, many days that I cried my eyes out because someone's beloved pet had gotten put to sleep. It is a very rough situation to handle. There have been times in my life that I have almost died myself. When I was pregnant with my son Ronan, I ended up having severe preeclampsia. It almost went into the eclampsia stage, which means you die. There's nothing that they can do for you. They can't reverse it. And the only way to cure preeclampsia is by delivering the baby. My son got delivered at 24 weeks along. He was born at 1.5 pounds. He ended up living for a month and 9 days, and he passed away from something called necrotizing enterocolitis on September 11th, 2009. So, people ask me, how can I talk about Ronan without breaking down in tears? The moment that I talk about him as his mom instead of as a person is when I break down in tears. I miss Ronan every single day. I think about him. I think about the things that he would be into, the things that he would like, how him and Willow would play together, how he would interact with his brothers and our critters. Um, I miss him very, very much. He was very, very sick, and because he was a research baby, um, he was a huge step in finding a cure for necrotizing enterocolitis. So I can take peace and comfort from, Ronan being able to help out other babies in preventing this horrible, horrible condition so that other parents do not have to suffer like we did. Um, Like I said, there have been a few times in my life that I have almost died. When I was born, my mom had preeclampsia, and I almost didn't make it, and she almost didn't make it. I almost died with having my son because of the preeclampsia. And then when I had my daughter, Willow, a year later, I almost bled out. They nicked my bladder, and I almost bled out on the table. Um, It was a really, really bad situation, but luckily me and her are here today. She's my rainbow child, my miracle, and I am very thankful that I had very good doctors that took care of me and her, and we're here today to smile and live our lives. But the situation with Ronan, it was a very bad situation because the preeclampsia, it puts protein in your urine, and the normal acceptable amount of protein is 300. And mine was 7,000 grams, and it was attacking my kidneys and my liver. My mother-in-law had told my mom and dad that I might have to have kidney dialysis after this whole situation because it was that bad. When they transferred me from Marion Hospital to St. Louis Barnes Jewish Hospital, they had to put magnesium in my system so that I would not have seizures. It was a really, really bad, scary situation. I didn't know if I was going to make it, and I didn't know if my son was going to make it. That's something that a parent should never have to go through. They should never have to bury a child. And, Ronan he would be 12 years old now. His sister Willow is 11, and he would be 12 years old now. And, I do think about what he would be like now. The only way that I have gotten through it is I have therapy cats, and they have helped me through it tremendously. My friends and family have helped me through it. Don't lock your friends and family or your animals off from you when you're grieving. They will help you. I know that not everybody likes to be hugged or held when they're grieving, when they're going through the grieving process. But believe it or not, just simply having a cat on your lap helps. Um, just somebody simply patting you on the back to let you know that they're there helps. Everybody handles the grieving process differently, and I can totally understand and appreciate that, but don't lock family and friends off because they will actually help you through it. Um, so, pretty much, death is a scary topic. A lot of us are, really scared to die. We're really scared of what's going to happen after we're gone. It's something that I have discussed with my husband. It's something that I have discussed with my mom and dad because tomorrow is not promised. You never know what's going to happen. You never know, you know, you never know if you're going to get hit by a car, or if you're going to get in a car accident, or if something's going to happen. Always take the time to end a conversation with friends and family peacefully. Always tell them that you love them because tomorrow is not promised, and you need to appreciate and respect and soak in every single precious moment with your family. I know this from experience. My stepsons, they were kids when their brother Ronan passed away. They thought that they were invincible, and Ronan passing away was the first time in their lives that they realized, hey, he's a little baby. If it can happen to him, it can happen to any of us. So definitely don't take your life for granted. Always appreciate everything that you have in life, and always make sure to tell your loved ones that you love them every single day. What my family believes in after somebody passes away is we believe that they go to heaven. On Halloween, I believe that the veil between the land of the living and the land of the dead is at its thinnest. And I believe that I can better communicate with my loved ones that have passed on. So I go outside and I look up at the stars and I tell them how much I love them and how much I miss them, and how much, that I appreciated every moment that I got to spend with them in my lifetime. So, yeah, death is a very scary topic in life. So, definitely, we all have our way of grieving. We all have our way of handling the grieving process. Some of us don't like to be hugged when we're grieving, and some of us don't like to be, you know, around people when we're grieving. Some of us like to be alone, but don't shut yourself off from the world. Let your family, your friends, your animals help you through this process of grieving. There is no shame in crying in front of people. There is no shame in handling it how you need to handle it. There's no time limit on the grieving process. You take however long that you need to grieve. There is no time limit. Don't let anybody ever tell you that there's a time limit and that you're being ridiculous for crying about an animal that has passed on or a loved one that has passed on, even years after it has happened. There is no time limit on grieving. Everybody has to handle the grieving process in their own fashion. Um, Another member of my family that had passed on was my mother-in-law. I'm going to go ahead and speak about her. She was a very important person in my life. She was more than just a mother-in-law to me. She was my best friend, and she had done a lot for me in my lifetime. She was a registered nurse, and I had to be given blood thinner when I was pregnant with my daughter, Willow. So we would go over to my mother-in-law's every single day, and it kind of made my mother-in-law feel good because she was getting to use her nursing license at that point. She was getting to, practice nursing because she would give me the shots in the stomach every single day that I needed to, blood thinner to have a healthy pregnancy. They thought that the reason why I had preeclampsia with my son Ronan had something to do with microscopic blood clots in my system. So they tried this very, very strong blood thinner, and my mother-in-law gave it to me every single day. She was a very, very important person in my life, and I miss her very dearly. She ended up having COPD, and toward the end of her life, she did not have very much function of her lungs. Like, she had 5% function of her lungs, and she was on oxygen. Uh, she ended up in the hospital at one point in time, and even though she had a do not resuscitate order, they resuscitated her because my husband, who was the person that would uphold the order, uphold her wishes, was not there. And my mother-in-law's sister was there. And so, like, in a panic, they had my mother-in-law resuscitated. So she ended up surviving. She was in the hospital for a little while. She ended up surviving that incident and living for a few months after that. She got to see her oldest grandchild graduate from high school, which is what she always wanted. She got to experience, me and her son have a baby together. Like, I have stepchildren, beautiful, beautiful stepchildren that I see as my kids, but she got to experience me and her son having a baby together and got to experience that grandchild. So she got to experience, a great grandchild in life, a grandchild, grandchildren in life, and she got to see her oldest grandchild graduate from high school. And that's what she wanted. Toward the end of her life, she was in a hospital bed in her very own home. She was hooked up to oxygen tanks. She was administered medication for the pain at home. There was a hospice nurse that would come in and check on her. And me and my husband were there holding her hand and in the room when she passed on. Very traumatic situation, witnessing the light leave someone's eyes and then passing on to the other side. I was so upset and heartbroken that I couldn't even figure out how to get back to my job. I had to call my job and tell them that my mother-in-law had just passed away. So it's a very traumatic experience seeing somebody pass away in front of your eyes. It's something that I wouldn't want anybody else to have to witness in their lifetime. But it has made me grown as a person, and it has made me a stronger person. Like I said, everybody handles the grieving process in their own way. Everybody has their own belief system. Not any single grieving process or belief system is wrong. Everybody is different. And the way we believe is that our loved ones go to heaven and, they have an afterlife up in heaven, and that they're happy and they're free of pain, they're no longer suffering, and they're living the life in heaven. I know that I believe that when it's Halloween, the veil between the land of the living and the land of the dead is at its thinnest, and so I go outside and I talk to my loved ones. It brings me comfort and it makes me feel closer to them that I go out there and I still, I talk to them as if they were there, and I tell them how much I love them, how much I miss them. There's not enough thank yous in the entire world to thank, my loved ones for what all they've done for me in my lifetime. I'm fortunate that I got to tell my mother-in-law that I loved her, and I got to tell her goodbye, and I got to tell her, that I appreciate everything she had done for me in life. I will be speaking of other topics in the future, sensitive topics. If any of you have any of your opinions, any ideas, just be polite about it, but I do accept opinions and ideas. I do accept, positive criticism. That's how I learn. And this is my first episode, so I am kind of nervous. I'm sorry if I stuttered. I'm sorry if I said a lot. That's what I see. That's what I do when I get nervous. I say a lot. And I have the tendency of playing with my hair when I get nervous. But I hope you enjoyed this program, and like I always say, love, hugs, and blessings. Make sure that you spend every precious moment that you can with your loved ones, because tomorrow is not promised. Always make sure that you end a conversation with, I love you. I appreciate you. Love and appreciation to all of you. Have a blessed day.